This is NR2003 Predicts. Using constantly updating ratings, we determine where Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series drivers will place at any given track any given week. Standard disclaimer, this video is for entertainment purposes only, using the process of automated intelligence and should not be used in the process of gambling. So here's how it works. We update drivers' ratings week by week as we go throughout the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series schedule. We run a 100% simulation with normal tire wear and fuel consumption. Qualifying results match what the drivers actually ran in real life. Because qualifying data can't be arranged at the same time as forcing cautions, stages will not be enforced throughout these races. And weather used reflects the real-time data based on the actual start time of the race. There may be some sunlight here in Texas, but it is a little chilly. It's a Hendrick front row. Johnson and Byron, Elliott just behind. The green flag flies here in Fort Worth. Johnson getting a good push on the inside. William Byron going to slide back a little bit. Austin Dillon qualified in that 5th position. He is doing pretty well right now. They put down some rubber and traction compound in those higher lanes in turns 1 and 2. Trying to make it a little more racing, and so far it looks like it's been working pretty well so far. Seen a lot of guys utilize those outside lines to make passes. Right now Johnson continues to stay out front, in front of the rest of the Chevrolets. A little bit of bookkeeping here. Reed Sorensen, he wasn't able to get off the grid. Blows up leaving pit lane. His car was not able to start the race, so he is going to place last in this race. That's the second premium car in the number 27. Now, there was a lot of talk about qualifying and how it turned out, and Kurt Busch, one of those guys that really did not have a good run, ended up qualifying 30th. He is trying to work his way up. You can see he's trapped behind Corey LaJoie right now. Kyle Busch did not make it out of round 3, and he is having a little bit of a work back to the front type of situation. But you can see he's doing pretty well right now. He's making a move around Daniel Hemrick, who's a little bit slower, starting to get the draft off the Penske guys. Bubba Wallace had a great qualifying run, which is a little bit surprising, but considering the kind of finishes he's had so far at this track, one of them being the top 10, I'm sure this is a little bit of a better track for him and trying to make the most of it. Daniel Suarez trying to make his way to the inside of Jimmy Johnson, who was the leader. Now it's Eric Jones who we're riding on board with. Suarez looked really fast on his own in qualifying. He actually was one of those drivers that ended up going out on his own and ended up turning a lap that was 4th quickest. Didn't even have to stay in the draft. Eric Jones now, though, he is out front, and he is really good on this racetrack. He's got 3 top 10s here, 2 top 5s. Average of 10.4 is 3rd among active drivers at this racetrack. Meanwhile, Alex Bowman is experiencing something very unusual in his race car. You can see the 00 of Landon Castle, Matt Tit also going to his inside. Those are 2 guys that should not be passing up a Hendrick car unless that 88 has a big problem, which it seems like it does. Meanwhile, at the front of the pack, Daniel Suarez saw the clean air for a little bit, but now it's Michael McDowell. Front row car, a little bit of a surprise to see them out front, but looks like the 34 is really clicking on all cylinders right now, and he's getting a push from Jimmy Johnson. It's definitely going to help you out. But as they catch the lapped car of Garrett Smithley, well, going to be a little contact between Bubba Wallace, Ryan Blaney, and Ryan Newman. And Wallace goes into the outside wall in turn 2, which has been really treacherous this weekend, and he is going to suffer for it. Tough break for Kurt Busch in the middle of the caution period. His car goes up in smoke, and that is going to take another one of those fast cars out of this race and send him back in the field in the results page. Michael McDowell will restart in the front, but unfortunately he will be passed up really quickly. We see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting to draft Joey Logano to the front. He's got a win here before, and he is also very accomplished on this racetrack. Over half the time he's finished in the top 10 in his career Cup starts here. Kevin Harvick, he is the most recent winner at this racetrack, won here in the fall. In the playoffs, I believe he had a little bit of a penalty, though, that took away the benefit for the playoffs to make him into the championship 4, but he is trying to fight his way right here, and he's headed toward the lead, but not before Brad Keselowski makes his way to the inside as well. This track has not been too kind to Keselowski, but of course, on the season, Penske and Gibbs have been the 2 names to watch out for as a whole team, and obviously Keselowski and Logano have things figured out, and they're currently working in a tandem to get to the front. Meanwhile, Martin Truex Jr. is really not having a good day as he is trying to get by Chris Buescher, but he's losing this lead draft. Seems a little bit like Bowman in terms of trying to get back up to the front. You can see we're getting a little bit of a break in the pack. Looking at the other pack, Ty Dillon had a solid qualifying run himself, but he is fading a little bit further back. Jimmie Johnson going to fade back a little bit right here as Brad Keselowski takes the lead. Kyle Busch to the inside, making his way up toward the front. And this is a pretty even playing field for the manufacturers, as you got all three represented in that top three. Austin Dillon starting to work his way up toward Eric Almirola. He's just inside the top 10, had that solid qualifying run. Trying to find a little bit of a good run here as he's only finished in the top 10 once here. Meanwhile, Kevin Harvick has slipped off that front pack and he is kind of in the middle of the two packs as there's a 6-car breakaway at the front. Harvick's in the middle and then the pack behind him. Johnson running into a little bit of a lap traffic issue as he's caught up to Bailey Curry in that 52 and a few other lapped cars. Timmy Hill being one of them. Wallace, also his damaged race car, not up to speed after that accident. You can see Brad Keselowski being held up by Curry as he is starting to lose those top three. They're starting to make their way around Wallace as well as McLeod in the 51, but you can see just as Keselowski escaped Curry, he is just behind Hill and starting to lose them again, but maybe he's going to have a little bit of a help from Logano. As you can see, Kyle Busch now up at the front of the field, and he won this race 1 year ago, and he is definitely accomplished here. He has 13 top 10s, 12 top 5s, 3 victories under his belt. Meanwhile, his teammate Martin Truex Jr., it appears that he is down a cylinder as he is racing along the likes of Ryan Preece, Landon Castle, and Corey LaJoie. That is definitely not where Juggy's racing machine should be, but we saw that incident take place a couple weeks ago with Clint Bowyer. He was down a cylinder, but his team told him to stay out, and that's what it appears the 19 is doing. Daniel Hemrick had a solid qualifying run, but he is slowly starting to drift a little further back in the field. You can see he's around Michael McDowell, Ryan Blaney, Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, some guys that have kind of fallen off the wayside, but he is not performing quite as well as he did in qualifying. And now we're going to see some green flag pit stops. You can see Joey Logano coming in as well as Brad Keselowski. The Penske guys staying together here. And here comes Chase Elliott. He is going to give up the lead to Kyle Busch, who will stay out a little bit longer. Kyle Larson would actually be one of the longest drivers to stay out. Denny Hamlin just behind him. And as green flag stops cycle through, it would be Brad Keselowski and Jimmie Johnson that get out front. Chase Elliott just behind, and a few other cars falling a little bit further behind. Here is Chase Elliott from his roof cam as we try to see if we can catch up to those two out in front. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch is slipping a little bit as he falls about a second off the pace of Elliott. Clint Bowyer trying to work his way back up toward the front. He had a lot to say after qualifying, just worked his way around Daniel Suarez, and he is trying to see what he can do to catch back up to the front pack, trying to chase down Ryan Blaney right now. They are just outside of the top 10, this pack is. And here is Martin Truex Jr. getting lapped up by Brad Keselowski and Jimmie Johnson. Clearly, even after that green flag pit cycle, they were not able to figure out what was wrong with that race car, and they're just trying to keep it out there to make sure that if other people crash, they can get the points from it. Denny Hamlin right here. He is leading the second pack as there's a 5-car breakaway out in front. And then 10 seconds in between both of those packs. Hamlin just happens to be the one that's leading the charge there. Logano is still trying to catch up to Keselowski and Johnson, who are dealing with a little bit of lap traffic now. Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch are within striking distance of Logano, and they're all just kind of making their way up via draft, and they're doing pretty successful at it. You can see Kyle Busch going 3 wide on the outside line, trying to pass up the lead cars as they battle with Chastain, Castle, and Tift. Truex Jr. actually got a little bit out front, and they're getting his lap back. Somehow it seems like that power has been found once again. You can see that the 19 car, it just seems like when he gets back into a lead draft, he can actually run pretty powerfully. At the moment, Brad Keselowski has gotten back around him, but Joey Logano is going to try to push him a little bit further back in the field so they can keep him down a lap to make sure that he doesn't make a gain once again. You can see now that Ryan Newman is about to be one of the next people to get lapped as Jimmie Johnson has worked his way back up to the lead. Newman pretty notorious for being hard to pass, but I'm sure he's going to get passed up pretty quickly. Earlier we saw Michael McDowell leading the race, had the lead on a restart, and now David Reagan starting to creep back up on Clint Bowyer with Ryan Blaney just in tow. His front row seeming to have a solid day. Michael McDowell has obviously fallen off that front pack, obviously didn't quite have the speed, and clearly Martin Truex Jr. does not either, as he is starting to fall away from that pack, as we were a little bit concerned about his overall speed. It looks like the draft was just not effective for him. Meanwhile, the Penske teammates are starting to draft again with each other, trying to get to the inside of Jimmie Johnson, who's powering to the outside. We talked about that outside line having the rubber and the traction compound, and it looks like Johnson's utilizing it pretty effectively, and that's keeping the racing pretty close here. William Byron, the next driver, about to go one lap down as this front pack continues to pick guys off one by one, starting to make sure that they do not have a chance at winning this race. Eric Almirola currently running in the 8th position and running in the 2nd pack. Doesn't have an amazing reputation at this racetrack, just 2 top 10s here, but one of them was at the most recent race last fall, and he could have an opportunity to get another one this time around. Kevin Harvick coming down a little bit earlier than the green flag cycle usually permits, but we will see Joey Logano and Jimmie Johnson coming down a few laps later. Now a little bit of an issue here. Chase Elliott trying to get into his pit stall. Austin Dillon trying to come out. They make contact. Elliott stalls his race car. He was running 2nd at the time, and he is going to fall some laps down as he has to get a little bit of repair work done on that race car. Joey Logano gets out in front, and here comes Elliott. Multiple laps down now as Jimmie Johnson is about to go right by him. Could help each other, those Hendrick teammates, as Johnson tries to catch back up to a Logano who is about 3 seconds ahead. Meanwhile, Harvick is just kind of in the middle of nowhere. Got Chris Buescher and Ryan Newman behind him, but he's racing no one for position, and none of those guys would really have the kind of speed that he needs to get back up to the front pack. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott, he's trying to kind of work his way around Jimmie Johnson, which is kind of confusing because they are still well behind Joey Logano, although Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski have now caught back up to Johnson. This was kind of your original 5 right here, but obviously Elliott has more problems to deal with, and now we see Martin Truex Jr. once again drafting back up with Keselowski, and really confusing day that Truex has been having, but he is obviously trying to stay in the hunt. Meanwhile, the draft has worked as Johnson has worked with Elliott to get back up to Logano, and now Johnson making his way back around the 22, and Keselowski has followed. As well, the 18 of Kyle Busch is there in the foreground, and he is remaining in earshot of this front pack. We touted Daniel Suarez's speed earlier in the race. Well, it looks like he's about to become the next victim of this front pack as he and David Reagan are being hunted down by Jimmie Johnson and BJ McLeod, the only car in between them. Obviously, the 51 a little bit more laps down. We also got Denny Hamlin up here, and he is chasing down Kevin Harvick, who is in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, we saw with him and a few other lapped cars, and now Denny and a few of the guys behind him are trying to chase back up to Kevin Harvick and try to get him involved in their pack, as well as put him down a few positions. And now we've got Clint Bowyer starting to go a lap down as he has tried to work his way through a draft, and it's just not working out for him, but he's going to have a little bit more of an opportunity to get back his lap as we see Joey Logano going to come down for a pit stop. And we saw the incident with Austin Dillon and Chase Elliott. Well, it's going to happen to Dillon himself as he is trying to come to his pit stall. Michael McDowell was trying to pull away, and they're going to make contact, and they're going to have some problems getting separated. Three's going to have to back up into his stall. McDowell's going to lose some time as well. And there was another little bit of an incident here. I don't know whether Keselowski made a really late call or just got loose off of turn 4, but he had to save it anyway and got on the pit lane. Went for his service anyway, but because he pitted without hitting the commitment line, he's going to get a penalty for that. And that is a big problem for another front contender. As they cycle around, no big advantage for Joey Logano this time. Jimmie Johnson is right in front of him. Kyle Busch is trailing by a bit, and he is trying to use the draft off of, I believe that's Clint Bowyer up in front of him, to get back toward them, but there's a lot of gap there, and this might be a little bit of a difficult time for Kyle Busch to try to play catch-up. Meanwhile, Kevin Harvick is in 4th place And he is just in front of Eric Almirola, his teammate, as well as Denny Hamlin. You can see here Logano is trying to play catch-up with Johnson. I mentioned his stats earlier. He is pretty accomplished here. No bad finishes around here very often. And now trying to see if he can pull off his second victory at the track. Meanwhile, Stenhouse Jr., he is doing okay for himself. He is trying to crack the top 10, and in fact, he might have an opportunity here as long as he can get underneath Brad Keselowski. A few Ford drivers right there trying to get up toward the front. But as it turns out, one of the drivers in that pack, Ryan Blaney, is going to have some problems. He cannot keep up the speed. He's going to fall off the draft, has to work with a lapped car, and eventually he's going to be caught up by the front two runners. Jimmy Johnson and Joey Logano going to catch up to him and put him one lap down. So a decent day going for Ryan Blaney. He is going to go a lap down though, but at the moment it seems like a lot of the field is a lap down, and I believe that would put the cars on the lead lap down to 10. We can see Austin Dillon. He's been kind of riding around this lead pack as well, trying to catch up with the leaders. And actually, Ryan Blaney, his speed is just so slow that he wasn't able to even keep up with those three. So Logano and Johnson really put a gap on Blaney. Harvick comes down, but talk about bad timing. Joey Logano going to get into BJ McLeod trying to make the pass. The 51 gets into the wall, and his teammate, Bailey Curry, both of the Rick Ware Racing cars wrecking at once, and that is going to bring out a caution. Major damage for both of those machines coming out of the same camp. And then on pit lane, Chris Buescher makes contact with Ryan Newman. Newman has to back up to get into his stall, but Timmy Hill runs into Buescher on pit lane, and that gets huge front-end damage for Timmy Hill and some moderate damage for Chris Buescher on his back end. Green flag flies once again. We are about 60 laps from the end of this one. Logano out in front, Johnson behind him, but Kyle Busch finds the gap in the inside lane, and he's able to utilize those lapped cars that are still under power to make his charge to the front. He has won both of the races so far this weekend in both the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series. That race yesterday really came down to strategy, but the truck race, he had a handle on it. He's going to try to put Clint Boyer a lap down, because the more cars you can put a lap down, the easier it's going to be heading forward, especially if you get another caution. We haven't talked about Kyle Larson a ton today, and he is trying to make his way up toward the front of this field. 11 races here in his career. He's finished in the top 10 4 times. He's doing solid right now, trying to work his way up here as Chevrolet has shown a little bit of power. Meanwhile, Kyle Busch is being held up by Timmy Hill, and that's going to be a huge damper on his performance right here, as he is now being held up along with Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex Jr., who are both at least one lap down. And all the way through the tri-oval is Kyle Busch having problems, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. also going to have problems with the 66. He is one of those lead lap contenders as well, and he is really getting held up, and he's going to fall far behind the rest of these guys as he currently runs 8th place. Eric Almirola is suddenly in the thick of things. Never earned a top 5 here, but he's currently running 3rd, and in fact, I believe as they cross the line, he'll be bumped up to 2nd place, just behind one of his Ford teammates, Joey Logano. Paul Menard behind him in 3rd. William Byron is kind of fallen off the group, and I believe he's leading a 2nd pack. I believe that if we're considering the lead lapped cars, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. would be in that pack that Byron is leading, but you can see the separation is there. Meanwhile, it's a battle between Keselowski and Johnson near the front of the field as the laps are starting to wind down. But you've still got a majority of those lead lap cars all in a group together, and they're trying to fight for every position. Here's David Reagan. He is working his way up toward the front of the cars that are one lap down, that are staying in this lead pack. Still obviously have a say in this, the outcome of this race. You saw Joey Logano having some problems with the lapped car, and he is trying to work his way back up toward the front of the field, and it looks like Timmy Hill's going to help him out a little bit right there, as Martin Truex Jr. and David Reagan held up. Possibly had a little bit of a ripple effect, and he's going to at least get a little bit of the draft back. Paul Menard making a move to the inside of Penske driver Brad Keselowski, and obviously Wood Brothers Racing, an affiliate of that team. But those two are just looking fast today. Menard's been very quiet in this race, Unlike Keselowski, who's been in the hunt the entire time, Menard does not have a considerable amount of success here. 1 top 5, 3 top 10s in 25 attempts. And meanwhile, Chase Elliott is kind of helping him out because he has a little bit of front-end damage from his incident on pit lane, holding up the rest of the field, but unfortunately that's not going to last Kyle Busch. Very talented and very fast this weekend. He is working his way to the inside of Paul Menard. Meanwhile, Joey Logano trying to play catch-up. He got a little bit far behind, and he is still trying to work his way back up, and you can see Menard is slipping on that outside line. He finally got shuffled out of place, and maybe these Penske guys are all going to have to work together. As you can see, lap car Ryan Blaney also falling back here in a little bit of this mid part of the pack. Once again, Timmy Hill holding up Kyle Busch, and this is just not going well for that 18 car as he tries to battle lap traffic. And you can see the rest of the lead lap cars going to his inside. We are hitting the end part of this race, but we are understanding that there could be some pit woes here. The way that caution flew is just a little bit short of their pit window, but no one wants to give up their track position or save gas. Keselowski making a move to the inside of Johnson as they work for the end of this one, but it looks like the 2 car is not going to have enough. Paul Wolfe calls him down to pit lane, and he is going to have to get his fuel. It looks like he is not alone. Jimmy Johnson now out front, just over a lap to go in this race. But it looks like he is slowing down, and he is coming down to pit lane. They are not going to try to stretch it. They are going down to pit lane, and Kyle Larson now takes the lead. As Johnson just slowly limping, he is not going to have a chance at the victory here today. But Kyle Larson, now with a little bit of a gap over Joey Logano, the next car. Matt Dibenedetto, where did he come from? He is not in the lead lap, but he is leading the lapped down cars, and he has a top 10 going for him. But Larson, with the lapped car in between him, over Logano, and even further in the distance, Kyle Busch. Larson has not been in contention all day, but the fact that that caution came out when it did, and he was still on the lead lap, he had the opportunity. And as he comes to the tri-oval, Larson is going to take the victory at Texas. Wouldn't say this is one of Larson's best tracks, but today he was able to conquer it. And that comes as we try to force out that Penske and Gibbs dominance. It's a Ganassi car on top, and as we talked about Chevrolet having power, well, they only had 2 in the top 10. Joey Logano, Kyle Busch round out the top 3. Eric Almirola, Paul Menard also making an appearance in the top 5. Jimmy Johnson, that late pit stop, puts him back to 7th place. Matt Dibenedetto, we didn't talk about him very much, but he ends up in 8th place. And how did Martin Truex Jr. end up in 10th? He ended up keeping that speed and getting a little bit lucky on that last caution to be able to get back up there. In 11th to 20th place, we've got Brad Keselowski, who had to make that late pit stop as well. Clint Boyer, Denny Hamlin, some guys we saw up front a little bit. Eric Jones, I believe he led laps at the very beginning of the race. Daniel Suarez had speed, but was not able to keep it up during the race. In the next 10, we've got Alex Bowman, who had a little bit of a slow car. Rookies Ryan Preece and Daniel Hemrick. Kevin Harvick, a little bit unlucky on his pit stop, ends up in 27th. Darrell Walsh Jr. with his damage ends up 30th. Chase Elliott, Austin Dillon, they both made contact with other cars throughout the race, and they end up in the 30s. Kurt Busch, definitely not a good day. Glad that his teammate was able to win. That is it for this episode of NR2003 Predicts. We hope you enjoyed the race, and we'll see you next time.